Hey guys, it's Maggie. So I'm super excited to be here today with Kristen, a very special guest. On my channel, she's going to be answering a few deep and meaningful life questions. We also just did a video on her channel where I answered a few questions about my squishy business, and it was super fun. Just a little bit about Kristen. She launched a fintech startup and got funding from YC Combinator. She's a nationally recognized flutist, and she graduated from Harvard with a degree in computational neuroscience. So Kristen, do you want to talk a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for that awesome intro. Very humbled. But yeah, I'm very excited to be here. And frankly, my resume confuses a lot of people because I've tried out so many things. But I think that's just a common theme of diving into something you might be interested in, even though you may not be the smartest person in the room. And I feel like that's a common theme that I've experienced through my life. Like I interned at an investment bank, never took a finance class before, but I really was interested in M&A activity in the news when I would see a company acquiring another company. So I guess if anything, that's like the common theme that ties all my uh, eclectic experiences together. So right now I work on College Lead, which is a college prep service. My goal in starting that is to answer the question, how can I increase access to high quality college prep information? Because I was homeschooled for most of my life for around 10 years. And through that, I had to teach myself essentially, how do I get into a good college and what is required to reach that point? So as I was going through that process, I realized that there's a lot of information out there, but it's often hidden behind a huge paywall. So one thing I wanted to do was see how I can increase access to that information. And the solution that I ended up with was YouTube, where anyone who has access to YouTube can view these how-to videos for free. So that's something that I'm very passionate about and working on now.
You should definitely check out her YouTube channel. So College Lead definitely has a lot of great college advice, as well as a lot of information on like starting businesses, how you should start your own company. And I also love the idea that you were homeschooled. I have a few friends who are homeschooled. They're like the most driven people I know. And it's great that you took the responsibility and you did manage to organize your schedule in a way to become super productive.
Being productive is always a challenge. I still play fun games on my phone. I watch Netflix, but I try my best to get things done.
Hey, it's about the balance. It's like we can't spend all day just working, in terms of resting that actually may boost our efficiency.
That's so true. Sleep is important.
That's true. And Kristen, if you want to ask me any of these questions or if you're curious about anything, feel free to ask. We can have a meaningful conversation. So I'll just dive into the first question. So we're actually going to start off like relatively surface level and then transition into more deep topics. So would you ever want to be famous, and in what way?
It depends on what you define as famous. If it's famous in the sense of an actor or actress, definitely no. That's not the kind of fame I'd want. But if it's something in terms of, let's say, being famous because I was able to affect a lot of change or have a great impact on people that I care about, then absolutely. Or is it starting my own business eventually and becoming successful? Also, absolutely. So I think it really depends. I don't think that fame should be a measure of success. Rather, you should just strive for personal growth in whatever you do. How about you, actually? I'm really curious.
Yeah, so I feel like fame in the superficial aspect, I definitely wouldn't want that. But fame in terms of actually making an impact, if you can use your fame to actually like sway some perspectives, impact people, and enable them to find their own happiness, then I think that's definitely meaningful. So yes, on that regard. So what is your favorite motivational quote?
That's a good question. Something my mom has told me ever since I was younger is that the largest room in the world is the room for improvement. And I think that really ties back to the idea of the growth mindset, which is regardless of what level of knowledge you are starting at right now, or how much talent you have in a certain aspect, you always think about, you want to focus on rather how much can I learn, how quickly can I learn, and how much can I grow? Because I think it's that rate of change that and growth that is more a reflection of how accomplished you are rather than I was naturally talented and gifted with this, aka I didn't do anything to get this talent, and I'm just amazing at what I do. There will always be someone with talent, and everyone, just because of how the world is structured, is going to be at a different point in the starting line. But kind of like the tortoise and hare situation, you always want to think about, as long as I continue moving towards my goal, I'll get there eventually.
That's a super sweet motivational quote. And yeah, it's like, as long as you leave room for growth, as long as you try to dive into the uncomfortable, you'll always like find self-development, and you'll really boost your character and reach towards your potential. So we're gonna go a little bit deeper now. What is your purpose in life? And if you haven't found it yet, what do you think it would be centered around?
I think I'm still looking for my purpose in life. I do have a few goals that I have, which is one, I don't ever want to become, I don't know if stagnant is the right word, but like set in my own ways. I know there's a lot of adults in the world who still view the world in as the same as the one they saw growing up. But with a lot of changes that are happening in the world, I think it's always important to question, what values and culture did I grow up with? How might they be wrong? And should I change? Because the last thing I want to do is be resistant to that. So I don't know necessarily what my goal in life is, but short term, I always aim to keep an open mind and learn as much as I can from others around me.
What drives you to work hard and pursue your passions?
That's a good question. It's going to sound very cheesy, but I just love the idea of learning more than I currently already, like, than the knowledge I currently have. I love working under the leadership of very inspiring people, especially within the startup world. I think among the people that I've met thus far, especially those who are further along in their career, I am in particularly very inspired and impressed with the knowledge that a lot of startup founders have gained, because it's not only specific to, let's say, just professional growth. There's a lot of aspects in a startup where just a few people are together. There's a lot of space for personal growth as well. Actually, yesterday I was watching a video it's by Y Combinator, Kevin Hale, giving a talk on how to work in a team and how to set the culture and how to give feedback. And I feel like a lot of that will go towards professional development. But it's also a chance to understand, for instance, the difference between an emotion and a thought, as he mentioned. For instance, he said there's the idea of saying, I feel judged, when it might be, I feel scared or I am hurt or something like that. And just recognizing how to communicate your emotions versus, I don't know, another kind of aspect. I feel like I'm going off on a tangent right now, so feel free to cut this out. But I think the bottom line is these different kinds of conversations are very important to have in both your personal life and your relationships, whether they be friendships, with family, but then also in your professional life when you're talking with your manager, you're doing a project with your coworkers and all of that. So I think that's what really inspires me, just seeing all these startup founders who are very aware of the difficulties in building and scaling something, but then also willing to contribute and share the knowledge that they have. So that's something that I am constantly working towards and love learning about. So I think, if anything, that's what drives me.
That's great. I really like the idea of like constantly learning and growing. And it's also the idea that I think it's like a quote, you're most like the top 3 people you hang out with. So if other people are super driven and inspired, you're likely also going to be driven and inspired. In the process, you really learn to like take on these strengths of those around you and also like do incredible things like those around you are seeking to do.
Yeah, I always like the idea of equating yourself to a sponge. You want to absorb the strengths of the people around you. So, because everyone has a different kind of strength and power to them, right? The best part about working with people you respect and admire is you can learn exactly how they develop their strength. And if their strength is something like fundraising, like marketing, or is it career development or something else, learn from them how they do that so that you can also, I don't know, mimic that skill to a certain extent.
So what is your ideal job or career? Do you value fulfillment and exploration or stability and guaranteed high pay?
That's a good question. And I think for me, I graduated from college last year in 2019. And so I'm still very much early in my career, whatever career you can call it, given that I've been out for just a few months. So I'm still very much in the process of figuring out what kind of role or job do I want in my life? And my guess is that that might change. Right now I'm in my 20s, might change compared to when I'm in my 50s or 60s or even 40s. So at least for right now, I definitely value, um, rather than stability, I value sort of just a fast paced environment where I'm surrounded by people who really inspire me and push me to learn. I'm in a position right now where I'm more of a mentee, especially entering the the workforce, because I'm very much going to be on the junior side. So at the moment, I'm just trying to think of myself as a sponge and learn as much as I can. So uh, high pay, obviously kind of important if I have student loans to pay off. You always have to you always have to be aware of things like that. But I would say if I had the choice, I definitely go with a place that's perhaps a little more less stable, but more exciting in a place where I am pushed to learn and pushed to work and grow because I just love that idea of working towards something. And I think it's that idea of anticipating what is it going to be like once you reach that goal that is kind of addicting, honestly.
Yeah, I love the idea of constant growth and just yeah, maintaining an open mind because we have so much to explore. It's like we should try to find meaning in our work, in our career, instead of just something that may like mentally or intellectually satisfy you, but may not bring you the same meaning. So I love how you're working towards that. What are you most thankful for?
I think the people around me, frankly, I'm most thankful for obviously my family. They have supported me since the very beginning. And then also a lot of my close friends around me, my relationship with my partner, my boyfriend. They're always just the people that I can go to when I want to bounce ideas off, when I'm stressed, or share in some of the excitements or accomplishments that or goals I'm able to reach. So I think one thing that I definitely took for granted growing up is just the supportive network of my family and friends that I had right now as I continue to advance my career. So I'm no longer in college. Seeing my friends is no longer as easy as just walking 2 minutes to go to their dorm room and chilling out and just planting myself in their common room and working together on something. Now it's they're a Zoom call away or we need to find something that works for both of our work schedules. So I think right now I'm very much focused on developing fewer but higher quality relationships with the people around me because I think that's really what's going to carry you forward rather than um, sort of pursuing many different relationships, but keeping that on the surface level. I feel like that's just not going to bring you as much joy in the long term. But I don't know. How about you, Maggie? I'm curious to hear your perspective.
Um, I feel like I would definitely value like fulfilling that sense of meaning, fulfilling my purpose. Um, I feel like high pay is definitely not necessary for me at this point because yeah, you don't derive happiness from like your pay, your paycheck. Happiness comes from feeling like you're fulfilling this fulfilling this purpose, this meaning of yours. And it's really interesting because I watched this video which said that none of us actually have a purpose. It's just a mental construct. It's just something that you create for yourself to find meaning and to find happiness. But I'm completely fine with that. Like everything is a mental construct, you know, like even love and things like that. Those are all like mental processes, but it doesn't make it any less meaningful. So in the future, I definitely value finding fulfillment in my work. It doesn't have to be high pay, but I really want to experience more, like you said as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, also, I'm wondering, how has it been for you, like transitioning out of college and working on your career? Like, what have you learned, and how has like the environment been overall?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different angles that I could talk about it. I guess first in terms of relationships, like I mentioned earlier, you're no longer going to be in a position where all of your friends live together within a square mile radius from you. So you're at a point where you have limited time. Scheduling is difficult, and you'll find yourself sort of thinking about what friendships do I want to cultivate and foster at that point. So I think it's a lot of focusing on more meaning and deeper connections rather than a lot of, I don't know, when you're in school, you kind of take for granted how you can just say hi to someone, but the person you say hi to, do you think there's someone who you will continue to develop a relationship with for the next 10 or 20 years? So that's a difficult choice to make. Obviously, if I could, I'd love to go back to college where everyone is just a few steps away. But the reality is life happens, things change, and you have a limited number of hours that in your day. So I think that's the first aspect. And I know that's not the easiest transition for a lot of people. The second, I think, angle is, well, now we are no longer taking classes. It's time to get a job. What exactly do we want to spend our lives working on, doing, and building? I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to experience what it is like building a startup from my college dorm room and taking that further beyond to a few months when I was after I graduated. My startup ended up failing, but I learned so much from that experience. Even wrote a brief article about what I learned from that. And I do hope to go back at some point, though I don't know in what capacity. So I think the fact that I worked on something, it failed, but I want to go back is a huge indication of maybe that's something that I want to pursue in the future. Right now, I'm working in education, and I think that's what really inspires me. Students like you, that makes me feel old saying students like you, because I was recently a student. But honestly, it's the ideas that you guys bring forward and also the projects that you're working on and what motivates, inspires you, that also kind of feeds back and inspires me to continue to work. And if anything, I think the mission of College Lead in terms of how can I increase access to college prep information to people, whether they are one of 1,000 kids in a public high school who have to vie for the college counselor's attention, or if they are at a low income place where they just don't have the resources to hire a college counselor, or you're an international student and have no idea how to apply to college in the US. So I think trying to increase access to college prep information is something that really drives me. And the basis of that is just that the students who I've seen and I've worked with are, if anything, just a huge inspiration for me.
Yeah, I think that's really pure. Just the idea of connecting with your students and like motivating each other. I really like that idea. I also love how you started like a company in your college dorm. Could you please elaborate a bit on the experience? Yeah, how it was like for you?
It was crazy. To anyone who actually wants to go into the startup space, I do not recommend taking classes and trying to build something at the same time. You're going to have to find yourself picking one or the other to focus on. I was actually, so I started building this fintech startup in my junior year, so my last semester of my junior year. And at that point, I was trying to balance working on a thesis in a lab and also working on the startup on top of taking classes. And I remember after that semester, I was exhausted. I couldn't continue to balance those three things, especially with lab work. I was training mice, so that requires me going into the lab for 4 or 5 hours every day on top of taking classes and building a startup. I had to make the difficult decision of what do I want to focus my time on. I ended up deciding to go with the startup and then also just continue with classes because I felt that having the opportunity to work on a startup was so rare and I didn't want to give that up. So yeah. In the fall semester, I took both classes and built a startup at the same time. Frankly, I was lucky in that it was my last semester of college, so I had the luxury of taking less intense classes, and I was just most of the time flying out trying to make things happen with the startup. So it was a crazy experience, but I learned so much from that.
When do you feel like you were living life to the fullest? And this can relate to the startup as well. And when have you felt like you weren't?
That's a good question. I'll start with when I felt like I wasn't. So I will say that I did have a sort of perfectionist mindset from high school, and that's not necessarily completely my fault or even of any student's fault who also has perfectionism, because the way the education system is set up is you're evaluated against your performance on a single test score or something similar to that. And there's very much this idea of your intelligence and your ability to learn is based on a static measurement, which is your grade. So that will feed back into this idea of I must always score as high as I can. If I don't, I'm a failure or something like that. And it's very difficult to break out of that mindset and think, okay, I got to be this time. That's fine. What can I do to get an A? It's always thinking about, oh, shoot, I failed. What do I do now? Everything's going to go downhill. So I think there's sort of two paths you can take on that. But the unfortunate reality is the basis of what a lot of us are evaluated on in high school is what is your state right now and how good are you at, rather than how much have you grown and what potential do we see in you. So I had to come to terms with that in my sophomore year in college when things were just getting rough and it was difficult to continue that mindset of I'm not doing well because I'm not able to perform as high as I was in high school. So I had to come to terms with that when I was in college and think about instead, let's focus on how I can improve. And instead of evaluating myself against what the school was evaluating me against, which was a set GPA, I started thinking about how can I grow, improve, and if I see growth, then I will consider that a success, regardless of what other systems or people think about me. So that actually resulted in, it was hard, but I would say, full disclosure, I started off with a lot of B's freshman and sophomore year. Junior and senior year, rather than thinking about, oh shoot, I'm a failure and this didn't work out, I instead try to figure out how can I improve, and if I improve just by a few points, that I will view that as a huge success. And I ended up with straight A's. So in the end, same result, but it's the idea and mindset that really helped to carry me forward. So in that moment that I realized, oh shoot, I was a perfectionist, let's change that and focus instead on how much I can improve and what I can do to improve. And I'm just going to view that as success rather than the state at which I am at right now. So I think it was that transition that sort of marks the change you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it's like comparing yourself to solely yourself instead of the system and with everyone else's grades. And I love that shift in perspective.
Yeah. How about you, out of curiosity?
When did I feel like I was living life to the fullest? What I sold at my first local fair, St. Patrick's Day fair, that was an exhilarating experience. For me personally, I love public speaking. I guess I love pitching and just like expressing my passion through my storytelling. And it was really cool to interact with my customers for the first time and actually like express my enthusiasm about like how I got this started, like why they should purchase, and just like having them connect to my project as well. It was just a really great experience. Yeah, in the future, I really want to do more like public speaking related stuff. And when have I felt like I wasn't living life to the fullest? When I wasn't pursuing a specific goal or when I wasn't like dreaming big. If the entire world was listening right now, what would you tell them?
Honestly, if the entire world was listening right now, I'd probably say something similar along the lines of try to think about what it's like walking in the shoes of your audience or someone else who has grown up in a different background and experience than yours. Because A, that's going to help you empathize with your audience and also with people who may come from a different background that is a little more difficult than the one that you grew up in. And I think it's that process of recognizing your privilege and what can you do with that that's so important. And also B, again, the world is becoming increasingly divisive, and I see that as a huge concern, especially when we should all unite and try to get things done, especially in terms of climate change and all these other issues. So if the world was listening, I would probably say something along the lines of really think about what it is like walking a few steps in the shoes of someone else who comes from a very different background or in culture than yours. What would you say if you had a platform like that?
Um, I would say to remember that you only have one life to live, that a lot of times you should seek to carve out your own path instead of following someone else's. That, yeah, life is too short to waste on things that you're not passionate about, on things that you act upon when you feel like this is what society wants instead of what you want. And life is too short to not impact others and to try to help out other people in a way because the world is not centered around you. A lot of people like have that perception just because like, you know, you're living your life, and it seems like everything else, your environment, it's all in relation to you, but in the end it's in relation to everyone else as well. And there are a lot of people who may not be as fortunate as you are, so you should definitely seek to take the leap and actually help them out.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's like a common theme between both of our answers, which is uh, think about someone else other than you or an experience other than yours, because you know exactly what your experience is like and what your life is like. What you don't know is what is the experience like of someone else, your neighbor, your friend, someone who lives on the other side of the country, someone who doesn't look like you. And that's really where you can really learn and be inspired.
Exactly. So yeah, that was the last question.
Let's go.
Yeah, that was great. Oh my
Gosh.
I had so much fun talking to you for both of our videos.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I feel like I learned a lot about myself, about you, and about life in general.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for dealing with these like really difficult questions, like just putting you on the spot, but you answered it really well, so it worked out
No,
well.
my pleasure, my pleasure. And I will say that who knows, my answers might change and evolve the older I grow and the more I experience. But I know it's difficult to have for both of us to have this conversation on a public platform like YouTube. But I would say that the whole goal of this is to encourage any viewers to consider the questions themselves, and also especially in terms of how do you define success, and what do you think will be the best for your goals on how to define success, whether that's the same as how society tells you to view success, or how you would like to redefine that for yourself. So I think, if anything, I hope that the one thing any viewers will take away is ask yourself these questions and see what your answers are as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's really about the viewers. Like, there are a lot of websites with deep questions that you can ask yourself, you can ask your friend, make a video or something. Yeah, just search them up and like they'll pop up. And yeah, so thank you so much for being here. Do you have any last minute thoughts or anything you want to share?
I guess the last note is, if you are a high school student, come check out my YouTube channel. I share a lot of information on how to write your college essay, how to plan extracurriculars, and I also share one-on-one interviews, including one with Maggie, but one-on-one interviews with other current college students or graduates on how they approached applying to college and what their experiences are. So come check out my channel and stop by and say hi.
Yeah, definitely check out College Lead. Kristen is a great person to talk to just get advice from. So yeah, highly recommend. I'll put everything down in the bio. So yeah, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.